sa, prova.
Anche il telecomando. Sì, 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 anche quello. È un laser, è un laser. E adesso... No, perché mi ha messo meno. Esatto. No, lo metto io. Aspetta, cavolo. Ah, giusto il nome. Prego, prego. Sì. Ma questa qua è... dove sta? Carica. Sì, sì, sì. Cavolo. person there who should take, who could talk. No, no, from here is different. That one. That one was. That one is for that company. But I hear something. Which one is Kalon? It's yours. Mm. Then if,
Hello?
if we are to present from there, how does our slide look like? We share from where? Because from here, I suppose we are not having control over that.
prendete posto, per favore. Vada. Dear friends, I'm sorry to say that we are a bit of delay because we're waiting for the Mayor of Naples and his the deputy, which has been blocked by the traffic on Naples. And so we've been waiting a few minutes. But I just want to introduce these meetings, saying that we are very proud to host here in this prestigious Aula Magna the friends and the operators which were committed to develop the result-based financing project over 3 years in the hospital of Lachor and in Gulu and Kalongo in northern Uganda, big hospital with which we've been collaborating in the last 20 years, developing a faculty of medicine and having a lot of relationship, including pediatric surgery and many specialists coming and going to collaborate with these friends. Unfortunately, we are a bit delayed, but we will recover our times because we will discuss this morning about the theoretical basis of result-based financing project. As you are aware, unfortunately, many, I would say most of the collaborating project between the Italian institutions and the African institution never reached the target which were proposed to. We have a long series of stories which were not concluded as well as. So these two big institutions, which is the foundation of Corte Foundation, which deals with the Lachor Hospital in northern Uganda, and the Ambrosoli Foundation, decided to experiment a new way of collaborations, which means not giving all the resources at the start of the project, waiting for a conclusion by a report, but following each single step of using the resources by setting targets at the start of the project and verifying each single action every 3 months, so that all the benefits of the project would be released only according to the quality score that have been reached by the staff and the people involved in the project. And this has been the very first time also the University of Naples was involved in this operation, in which we actually measure step by step the quality of work, the progress of the work, and release accordingly their own resources. This project has been started in 2018 and finished in 2020, 3 years, and actually produced a significant step forward in the care of very sick children in the hospital of Lachor and the hospital of Kalongo, as you will hear in the afternoon. So the morning will be dedicated to the theoretical basis of result-based rewarding project, and the afternoon will show you the detailed results of each single institution. This Congress will be partly in presence, but the vast majority of the people attending are online, and they are from Africa and from all over Europe. And we will benefit of the participations of our colleagues from Lachor and from Kalongo. I would say that this is also the occasion to show that there is no more space to develop a project which is just a gift to another country. Now it's a peer review process which we want to pursue. So it's intra-pairs collaborations between operators of different settings and involved in the quality assessment project. The University of Naples benefited very much from this collaboration over the last 20 years because of very many doctors, specialists, training students went to this hospital to experiment a large amount of disease processes which are not very common in our places. And all of them, when they went back, about 40 of them, benefited very much from this experience. On the other side, 42 professors from the University of Naples went to La Shore to help establish a faculty of medicine. They were not paid, they paid their own fee, their own expenses, and they actually performed quite well to build up a faculty of medicine, which is now completely staffed by Ugandan professors and is producing quite a lot of doctors. I just want to say that when we started in 2003, after an Ebola epidemics, which destroyed part of the staff of the hospital, and during a terrible war with the rebels from Lord's Liberation Army in northern Uganda, with 5 million people set up in refugees camp. When we started, actually, there were only 28 doctors operating in northern Uganda. Most of them left for the insecurity to live in Kampala, had their families there, so many hospitals were abandoned, and we saw with our own eyes how many deaths of mothers and children were happening because of lack of care. But the hospital of La Shore never closed under the guide of people which are now attending today here, and they pursued their own missions without fear of the war or epidemics. By now, the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Gulu, which was funded by the Gulu-NAP collaboration, have produced more than 800 new doctors, which are spread throughout the countries. In each single of the 42 districts of Uganda, only 5 left the country. As you know, this has been a large problem in Africa. Big university, like also the one from Makerere in Kampala, produced quality doctors, but unfortunately the majority of them, within few years, left the countries because of attraction by English-speaking countries like UK, Australia, South Africa. So these Ugandan people produced expensive doctors, and they actually lost very many of them. From these Gulu-NAP collaborations, we are aware that only 5 among 800 of those new doctors left the countries, and all the others are very much committed to change the health situation in North Uganda. At least 5 of those students were actually now committed to be the leaders of the health system in North Uganda. I'm very glad now to say Dr. from the municipality of Naples, Professor Filippone, is now coming to say, please.
Posso parlare da qua? Perfetto. Allora questo glielo rido. Si sente? Buongiorno a tutti. Mi scuso del ritardo, ci sono state delle piccole, diciamo, aporie nell'organizzazione della giornata. Ci tenevo moltissimo a essere presente, anche perché sono qui soprattutto perché rappresento il nostro sindaco. Rappresento il sindaco Gaetano Manfredi, rivolgo a voi il suo saluto e il saluto della giunta della città di Napoli. Vi devo dire, questa è una sala che io ho molto frequentato, è un luogo nel quale, facciamo così, mi abbasso anche un po' la mascherina, è un luogo nel quale, mi auguro che sentiate meglio così,
ma secondo me non sento.
Dicevo, il luogo nel quale sono avvenuti tanti straordinari eventi, negli anni ultimi dell'Ateneo. Per 2 anni questa sala è rimasta chiusa per le note vicende e speriamo di non doverlo fare più. È stata riaperta pochi mesi fa e devo dire è stato questo luogo il centro di una serie di iniziative culturali utili, significative per la rinascita della città, e quella di oggi rientra in questa direzione. Voi in questo convegno fate un'azione che io ritengo doverosa, in primo luogo per chi si occupa di gestione della cosa pubblica, rendicontare. Quindi voi darete conto di quello che è accaduto, oltretutto in contesti, in ambienti che riguardano il mondo della solidarietà, della vicinanza ai deboli. Io ho lavorato per molti anni nella scuola e uno degli obiettivi della scuola italiana primari è quello di abbattere i muri e costruire ponti, che è quello che sicuramente è avvenuto e di cui racconterete oggi. Io mi devo scusare perché i miei sono solo saluti. Non potrò rimanere perché ho altri impegni stamattina, ma vi rinnovo l'augurio, vi rinnovo...
Bring you the greetings from the rector, Professor Matteo Lorito, that for institutional commitments can't be here. Today's meeting is based on the result-based financing, in particular on the result of the activities in Uganda. So the speakers who will follow and whom I thank for their presence will go into details of these activities. We are very happy to have here this important result, this meeting, because the project in Uganda, in Gulu, for us is a flagship that we want to continue to have. Thanks to everybody, thanks to Luigi Greco, that is the mind of the heart of the Gulu project for Federico II. Have a good job.
So good morning to all. Do you hear me? It's too loud? It's okay? My name is Thomas Molteni. I was the administrator in Laccio Hospital when the first RBF was introduced. Now I'm the country representative in Laccio Hospital for Codi Foundation. I will chair this morning session of this conference. We will have a coffee break of 15 minutes at around 11:15, might be delayed a bit, and then at 1 o'clock we will have lunch. I would first start by expressing in the name of the foundation and the two hospitals, the two foundation and two hospitals, our deepest gratitude to the Agency for Italian Our Ugandan friends. The goal of today's conference is to talk about the results of two projects, RBF projects, that were made in the north of Uganda, in Kalongo and Laccio Hospital. But I hope that the focus will not so much be on the past and only on the past, but also on the future. How much can this project be replicated, expanded, and improved, if necessary, in the future? RBF, in a nutshell, Professor Greco has already said it, but it's about focusing on the results. Projects and cooperation in the past have often focused on the money spent. Then, of course, there was monitoring, evaluation, the result. Now, RBF is about giving the money only after results have been achieved. In case of hospital, this means to go and see the number of patients that have been treated, to pay according to how many patients have been treated, and probably the most innovative thing is to go quarterly to verify the quality of the treatment given. You can give a treatment, but if it's wrong, it doesn't improve the health. You have not achieved your result. The quarterly verification had the goal of verifying, for example, on sample cases that the correct treatment was given, the correct protocol were given, and the money given was proportional to this. And being there, I have also seen, and Dr. Matting from Lacho Hospital and Dr. Smat will probably tell us, the effect that this has on the staff. But not because they are interested in the money, it's because of the recognition, the intrinsic recognition that they get by somebody that from outside recognizes the value of their work. This we have really seen in La Shore. For me that I was there, I'm sure it's the same in Kalongo, was the driver and what really surprised us of this project. All this, in the end, is about the effectiveness of aid. We need to prove that the aid that is given provide value for money. And I know this focus is at the heart of the agency of the Italian Cooperation and Development. So they have focused on innovation, innovative way, and I would like to invite and introduce Mariangela Pantaleo from the Italian Agency for Cooperation and Development, and tell us a bit of how the RBF fits in the cooperation strategy of the agency. Thank you.
Good morning. Let me convey the greetings from Grazia Sgarra, the head of office for CSOs and partnership and finance for development from the National Agency for Development Cooperation. My name is Mariangela Pantaleo. I'm an external consultant from SOGESIT, which is the in-house of the Ministry for Ecological Transition, supporting the national agency in different programs. I've been assigned to this office. I'm very excited to be here again in presence in this wonderful venue, and first of all, I'd like to thank all the organizers, the Corti Foundation, the Ambrosoli Foundation, and the university for organizing this conference, giving us the opportunity to learn, to discuss the results of the project and to share lessons learned. And thank you to the university for hosting here. Thank also to all the participants that are attending online. I will start by introducing the importance of result-based management in the agency. Then I will move to how result-based management interlaces with result-based financing, and come to give some hints on the potential of result-based financing in development cooperation. Result-based management in the Italian development cooperation has been introduced by, firstly by Law 125, that's the law that created the agency and reformed the whole system of development cooperation in Italy. But nonetheless, two round of the peer review from the OECD Development Assistance Committee highlighted some weakness in the understanding and integration of result-based management in Italy. Now we are in the middle of a process of integration, and the three steps of this integration can be summarized in the adoption of the Plan for Intervention Effectiveness in 2019, who laid the ground for the integration of the principle of aid effectiveness agreed in the new European Consensus for Development. Result-based management, inclusive partnership, ownership of development priorities by partner countries, transparency and mutual accountability. This is the very first operational act of this process. And so far, the new grant procedures for CSO have been introduced in 2020, which are the procedures that we are piloting right now with the assessment of the proposal that have been submitted to the call for proposal launched in December 2020. There are around 230 projects submitted by Italian NGOs. And at the core of the new grant procedures, there is the selection of smart indicators to assure measurability of results. So the requirements of these grant procedures is to align indicators to international standards at all the level of the result chain. Indicators should be codified, and reliability of source of verification should be assured. The new grant procedures also allow for greater flexibility in the amendment of activities. So NGOs will be able to amend, to change activities, to vary the budget, and also the duration of project, provided that the agreed results are not changed. The grant procedures also foresee a cost reduction mechanism in case of late implementation or partial implementation of partial achievement of the agreed results. The call for proposal launched in 2020 provided for a strong alignment with SDGs target, and this will also help the agency in the collection of statistical data to contribute to global reporting of SDGs. This is a confidential information that I can share, that the quality of the proposal that have been submitted is higher, and that the RBM approach has been integrated in the average of the proposal. And this is a good news for the agency and for the Italian cooperation. Now coming to result-based financing. As you introduced, it is an umbrella term to refer to every program that rewards institutions or individuals based on the achievement of results under external verification. This is a shift from the traditional approach in input-based aid, where funding is provided for the activities, to finance input to implement activities that are supposed to produce results. So there is a shift in the risk sharing between the donor and the agent. And the rationale is to shift to performance, to shift focus to output and to outcomes, and especially outcomes, not to avoid, to neglect the important aims of the programs. Now, as in result-based management, the focus is on results. So I want to stress here that the key word in result-based financing is results. And measurement and independent verification is crucial in both result-based management and result-based financing. So we see, let's say that result-based financing is just an innovative funding mechanism that is based on result-based planning. So we need a good result chain to be designed at the beginning of every kind of intervention, where all stakeholders are involved in the assessment of needs and of the context-specific constraint. Now, the result-based financing has gained momentum in the healthcare sector. And this is not a coincidence, as outcomes are easier to verify in the healthcare sectors. And several middle and lower income countries have experimented with these schemes, and several reports mark an increase in the quality and in the quantity of care and the extension of the access to basic health care. And experts agree that, in a result financing, in a result-based financing scheme, disbursement can be made at the level of activities, of outputs or outcomes. And the lower the level where we put disbursement, the lower the risk. Now, in the health sector, as I anticipated before, verifying the outcome is easier. The donor knows what to buy because they can easily verify outcomes. But practitioner and experts agree that selecting target closer to outcomes than to outputs reduce some of the risk of disincentives or neglecting the very aim of the program, which is usually the quality at the wow. I was saying that sometimes some have criticized the widespread use of these schemes because they have highlighted some negative unintended side effects like neglecting the very aim of the program and focusing on the quantity at the expense of quality, for example, or the risk of collusion between the users and the agent, or the risk of over-reporting performance. So this is why, as I was saying, some agrees that putting the setting that is the improvement of the quality of services, and also on that higher ambition of these schemes to stimulate a structural reform of the healthcare system. So, coming to a conclusion, we can say that result-based financing is a tool. It provides a potential to improve the quality of services and to improve the effectiveness of aid by strengthening the ownership from the partner, from the implementing partners, improving performance and shifting the attention on results. But it's a tool in a toolbox where the toolbox is result-based management. So result-based funding schemes can be adopted in parallel or in the wider context of aid programs where technical assistance can provide, for example, capacity building for staff, as those funding schemes that provide financial incentives not necessarily provide this kind of support to the structure, to the beneficiaries. The agency has not yet experimented with this funding scheme except for this project, and only one other experience, which is a social impact bond managed by the International Red Cross. But as for our office, the only experience is from this project, which is an hybrid case, as Fondazione Corti applied for a traditional call for proposal addressed to CSO and received ECO funding for the implementation of the project we are hearing about today. And the project partially funded equipment or the staff, and partially funded the result-based financing scheme. So I'm really happy now and looking forward to hear about results, as it is an important experience for us. So, thank you.
Grazie. So I thank you very much for your contribution as well as the support to the project. Before continuing with this session, I would like to invite Professor Graziano, that was forgotten. I'm sorry for that. She had to make the foreword.
So, good morning. It is a great honor to welcome the conference on result-based financing on behalf of my department, the Department of Economics and Statistics of the University Federico II. As Alessandro said before, our rector is not here, but he personally expressed to me the appreciation of our university for the importance of this conference and of the results that will be discussed. I wish to thank the Italian Agency for Cooperation and Development, the St. Mary Hospital in Lacor, the Corti Foundation, the Ambrosoli Memorial Hospital, and the Ambrosoli Foundation for having made this conference possible, and the organizing committee, in particular Professors Sergio Beraldo, Luigi Greco, Margherita Arcidiaco, Michela Collaro, and Domenico Suppa. As you know, and as Professor Greco very well explained before, the result-based financing programs have been implemented in many countries and in connection with the health and education system. From my point of view, these kind of programs especially require reliable data and methodological skills to analyze them. I'm sure that these skills and methodological tools are at the base of many presentations today, and I'm just here to say that our departments, the Department of Economics and Statistics, many of our projects are based on the same tools, so we are very proud of this collaboration. Our recruitment is advertised on the international job market. Many of our senior and junior professors operate in the health and labor economics as well as in the household economics, so we strongly hope to new opportunities of collaborations with operators and researchers that are here today. And in closing, I also hope that you will have time, of course, that you will appreciate the scientific program, but that you will have time to appreciate our city, museum and monuments, and so have a nice conference here in Naples. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to talk with, to hear from the technical people if the connection with Domenico from Milan is ready. Otherwise, the two contributions that are now from Ambrosoli, Giovanna Ambrosoli from Ambrosoli Foundation and Dominique Corti. So let's wait to hear if Dominique is online. Yes, she is. So, Dr. Dominique, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
We don't hear you yet. You have the microphone. We still don't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I can hear you. Hello?
The audio is still... You have to, Dominique, you have to raise your voice, they tell me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we hear you. I think, do everybody hear Dominique?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone, and very pleased and honored to be here speaking about, well, RBF, of course, but the hospital, my hospital first and foremost. Can you see my screen? Is it shared?
There is a...
So I will go straight into it. Rather than talking about the RBF per se, which will be dealt with in much greater detail today by others, I will explain why the foundation reached the idea of going into RBF financing for the hospital. I was in La Chore Hospital a few months ago, and I was speaking with Mariano Odoppi, who is the head of our vehicle fleet. He's been working in La Chore Hospital for decades. And he was telling me about the loss of his daughter, a midwife who had fallen sick some time before that, and had experienced what it means to be in a place where for any kind of treatment, money requests keep piling up day after day in a very unsustainable way, adding to the pain of the loss. And I was thinking while he was talking that this is the very reason why we work in La Chore and in the foundation. In European countries, we have the immense privilege of having forgotten one of our grandfather's greatest fears, falling sick. An illness means no income and spending a lot of money for treatment at the time, or deciding to forego treatment altogether because it is unaffordable.
Excuse me, Dominique?
Yeah?
Could you talk a bit closer to the microphone?
I am talking just beside your microphone, the amplifier that you have.
And raise a bit your voice, maybe. Thank you.
Okay. According to the World Health Organization, more than 150 million people each year face catastrophic health expenditures. This means families are forced to cut down on necessities such as food, clothing, or are unable to pay for their children's school. Indeed, illness is the first cause of falling into poverty, even before the loss of a job. We believe that the hospital's very low fees that are maintained with immense effort in a way that makes them accessible to the poor and the vulnerable, according to the hospital's mission, is a direct contribution to poverty alleviation and prevention, besides care and training that the hospital's core job implies. This is the hospital in 1965. When my parents arrived, it was a small 30-bed hospital built by the Comboni missionaries for the local diocese. If you see the income, 67% came from user fees. My parents' dream at the time was to offer the best possible care to the greatest number of people at the lowest cost. If you're in a condition of having very few resources, it is extremely important to make sure that those resources are stretched out as much as possible to make a difference to as many people as possible, if it is difficult to go elsewhere for care. And this is the hospital today. You can see the immense number of patients treated, over 250,000 average pre-COVID years. This is done by 700 Ugandan staff, not including the interns. And as you can see, the income has flipped. User fees are down to 23% and donors up to 66%. How do we do this? And this is our job as foundation. Last year's support to La Chore Hospital, out of 3 million euros of expenditures, 79% were institutional expenses, which means support to La Chore Hospital. Out of this, 66% go for hospital current expenses. 1.5 million each year minimum goes for current expenses. And then there's the rest, of course. The Corti Foundation is dedicated to finding donors willing to contribute to current expenses. This has been the fight since the beginning. Specific requests that usually are made to donors for equipment or infrastructures are only made usually to donors who will not accept to fund current expenses. And some of these have been our challenges since the beginning. Common beliefs, for example, non-profits should have less than 5 health, which is health that strives for equity, quality care to the poor. Another myth is no one will ever give you money for a hospital's running costs. Now, this is really bizarre. If we think that in Italy, per capita health expenditure per year reaches $3,000 US, and it's 50 in Uganda, how on earth can one think of giving only infrastructures and equipment and expecting a hospital striving to help people who cannot pay to make running costs covered by patient fees that would make them inaccessible? And this is what we usually face, donors saying that I want to make sure my money is well spent, so I will fund only equipment. But according to the WHO, as you can see, this is not a way of making sure your money is well spent. So the foundation is dedicated to supporting current expenses. And so why result-based financing? Following a positive experience with a new health project, RBF, financed by UK aid, the hospital directors and Corti Foundation decided to propose to donors an internally developed version. For donors, we hoped it would be a more interesting form and more enticing form to support current expenses. And for the hospital, it was a way to continue successful implementation of continuous quality improvement. That is, in acceptable small steps with a long-term perspective, fostering a hospital-wide team-building approach. Bonus, for example, for good performance is collective, avoiding inequity and conflict. Our mandate is first, do no harm, and therefore also avoid the pitfalls that we had seen in other RBF schemes, like cherry picking, internal competition. What did we find that the donors expected? The donors have a very strong focus on care to the poor and the most vulnerable. This allows us to keep patient contribution to hospital income below 30%. Donors also appreciated the stepwise extension of quality and quantity indicators that are very carefully selected and verified quarterly in order to improve the whole hospital system, not just the silo of the wards that are involved in the scheme. Staff at all levels in the department are involved in the process, and this is one of the most valuable and interesting aspects of growing together. And the bonus achieved by the project is also replicated by the hospital and assigned to all wards in a way of avoiding inequality with staff working in wards that are not yet involved in the RBF scheme. I'd like to end this very brief presentation and looking forward to the next discussions with a photo that shows the people who are responsible, the directors and the chief nursing officers of the hospital that make this hospital so special, them and all the staff who work for the hospital. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And now we heard the words from the daughter of the Cotis, and now it's time to hear from the relative of Ambrosoli, who founded one of the other important hospital in the north, the Calongo Hospital. Thank you, Giovanna.
Good morning to everybody. First, I would like to thank the University of Naples and the Departments of Economics and Statistics supporting us in this project, Fondazione Corti, and our contributors, AIX and Fondazione Cariplo. And I would like to thank all the participants to this event. So, before talking about RBF impact in the hospital, I would like to briefly introduce our history in the hospital. The hospital was founded, Calongo Hospital, in 1957 by my uncle, who was a surgeon, a missionary, and who dedicated all his life to care the most vulnerable and the poor in an extreme part of northern Uganda. And after 2 years from the foundation of the hospital, I think he was a visionary because he decided to found a midwifery school guided by the idea that women should play a central role in healthcare sector. So he placed at the heart of his mission all his life the training of health force, local health force, and female health force. He died in 1987 during the terrible, dramatic civil war after the evacuation of the hospital. And he died because he delayed to repatriate because he strongly wanted to find out a suitable solution, allowing the school to go on with its educational activity. He rests in Calongo, where he wanted to stay, and in 2019, Pope Francis declared his beatification, that we are still waiting because of the pandemic. So Ambrosoli Foundation was founded after some years in 1998 to guarantee the future and the continuity of the hospital and the school. And we took up the legacy of Father Giuseppe Ambrosoli, and under the Combonian values, that is save African with Africans. So our core mission is to guarantee health care to the local population and to the most vulnerable and the poor. We provide financial assistance, technical assistance, and facilitating partnership and projects for the benefits of the hospital. Look at the context of the hospital. The hospital is located in Agago district, which catchment population is about 250,000 people, but is the only general hospital for the district and for the 6 neighboring districts. So reaching a catchment population of about 500,000 people. And this is important to know, because then we will see that this location, the challenges, have strongly impacted also on RBF system. The area is very underserved, very poor. This area has the worst network road in the whole country. No tarmac road reach Calongo. Population is really poor, and consider that 37% of population is children under 10. And electricity is also, this area is lacking of infrastructure. As electricity, only 5% of households are connected to electricity, and live of subsistence, only of subsistence farming. Also, other data, just to give you an idea of the poorness of the area, the mortality rate are very high. Infant mortality rate in Agago district is estimated to be about 50 deaths out of 1,000 children. And so, as well as fertility rate is so high, 7.7. I want to give a few data just to give you an idea of the challenging context in which the hospital has to operate. It's an hospital of 271 beds distributed in different wards, and it is the 8th performer as general hospital in Uganda in terms of output. That is, it has an intensive activity, as the hospital is the only referral general hospital in this district. So, one of the main disadvantage and negative aspect, the main challenging of the hospital is that the area is very remote and the hospital suffers the lack of specialists. Specialists do not find attractive to stay in Calongo. We have only one surgeon and one surgeon expatriate, and we are waiting Dr. Ocao as pediatrician coming back to Calongo after his master. And sometimes even medical doctor, general doctor are lacking in the hospital. So these are great challenges for activities of the hospital and also for impacting the RBF system. The RBF project funded by AIX and Fondazione Cariplo was not the first RBF project introduced in the hospital. The hospital had until 2015 another project funded by UK cooperation. But then this system was not continued. So this is a new experience for the hospital and the first time that this project, this system has been addressed to a specific word, the children ward. So we, during these years of project, there were significant improvements, but at the hospital we faced also several challenges, and I would like to start from the challenges. So the first challenge is about the lack of the high turnover of personnel. Consider that in the children ward, in 3 years, 5 in-charge doctors, 5 head responsible of the ward, followed each other. And no one of them lasted more than 1 year. So this, how can this impact on the ownership, the leadership of the project in defining, clearly defining role and responsibilities, and it was a real challenge, this high turn of staff. We are happy to say that the first doctor who was involved in the RBF, in this RBF project, was Dr. Maurizio Cao, who is our guest speaker today, and he went for a master's in pediatrics, is near to come back to Calongo as of the head of pediatric ward. Then a second aspect that I would like to consider is that the project, the system, took time, the staff took time to interiorize the mechanism of the system, to understand, especially in not looking at this new system as a judgment, with a fear of judgment before verification, because of the assessment of the performance, but in order to see the system as an opportunity to improve the capacity and the quality of the service. Another aspect is the change of mindset, of approach to work that happened during these 3 years of project, but that has 61 bed capacity. Sometimes the staff, the ward, admitted 300 patients per day. You imagine how the challenges for staff working in the ward, and how can be difficult to perceive RBF system as a priority compared with the daily emergency that the hospital has to face. this is very, very, very hard for the hospital. But looking at the improvement, for sure, there were significant. We experienced a strengthening of team spirit, of a cohesion of the team, and especially particularly a strengthening of the follow-up procedure that the team by themselves put in place. This was not planned in the initial project design, but the team decided to organize a regular meeting, looking at discussing about problems, about shortcomings, trying to find out a proper solution, and following meeting to verify that action had been put in place and solution found. So this, in my opinion, was a very, very great result. The last comment that I would like to leave here is about the bonus performance and the distribution of the bonus. This is an ongoing discussion. I think that it is a very tricky point, very tricky aspect, and in this year I think there is not a unilateral and unique solution on that. During these years in Calongo, there were some changes in the beneficiaries of the bonus to be distributed, in the timing of the bonus, and also in the amount disbursed. And I think, personally think that this aspect is one of the aspects that should be thought, deepened, and improved, because it is really challenging. But despite these challenges, I think that we experience that the positive aspects, the improvement, overweight significantly the difficulties that the hospital faced in these years. Thank you.
So, thank you very much both to Dominique and Giovanna, both with their families have showed this passion. And I think your presentation was so beautiful in showing us also some real pictures of the people there. And the focus for Giovanna and Dominique in these two passionate presentations have been on the local. We have really seen the pictures of the courtyard with all the relatives coming. Now we are jumping to a global perspective, and I want to introduce Nicoletta Dentico, who is head of the Global Health Program for the Society for International Development, but is in general an expert in global health, has worked previously for WHO, Médecins Sans Frontières, and has written some books about global health. So I thank you very much, and I introduce you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you hear me well. And thank you. Thank you to all the organizers for inviting me to this very interesting conversation. A controversial one, I think, in many ways, too. I think Giovanna raised these issues just now. I'm overwhelmed by this place, and I'm overwhelmed by the idea of being in Naples at the Federico II University, discussing about, well, the topic of the day, health, the right to health. How do we secure the right to health? Now, I will, I had some notes, but I really would like to respond also to especially Dominique and Giovanna, because in the end, health suffers from an important pathology. And let me tell you this, as I'm, I think, part of the Barnum circus of those talking about health in Geneva, in these, bubble places where you have a lot of people discussing about health, donors talking about health, and they've never been really to the places where health is challenged, where the right to health is such a daily conquest. So I'm very glad that here you have people that actually do have to face that challenge with the people every day. I will be a bit provocative, because also I'm stimulated by the presentations that are made. We have, of course, this experience. I'm now browsing through the documents that have been given to us today, but I really would like to start from where Giovanna ended, saying that there are successes because you're working in a collective mood. You're trying to do team building. You are trying to create pathways of engagement, of recognition of the work of the health personnel that is never taken for granted. I mean, this is not an African problem. This is not a problem of the Global South. Health personnel is usually not recognized. And health suffers from a very hierarchical culture often, so that nurses count less than doctors, which is, it's a real ridiculous statement or assumption when you are in a hospital or when you are dealing with health. So there is a kind of also professional hierarchy that sometimes becomes military hierarchy, because health has to do with life, and there are a lot of implications around health. So finding a way, as you are trying to do clearly, to create a team spirit, to empower people to participate in a health strategy is great. And it's clear that measuring the activity, being aware that you should really be mindful of how you do things and what you do to improve the life of the person that is in front of you, the patient, and not the client, as you will find in much of the result-based financing literature. Patients called clients. Let's remove, please, this jargon. When you have a person in front of you, this is great. So I am not talking about your projects, which I honestly, I'm learning about now. From what I see, I think you are reinterpreting the RBF model, which is, as you already mentioned, Dominique and Giovanna mentioned it, a UK development agency model. In fact, this question of the UK, value for money is also applied to the international organizations. The UK DFID carried out a few years ago an entire review on the multilateral system with the measurement of value for money. Now, you tell me how you value the use of the money for policy making, and a system that includes 194 governments with different and diverging interests. I really would like to have, the first provocation that I really would like to make to you all. You have talked about results, performance, measure, incentives. This is a semantic cloud that actually belongs, first of all, to the private sector. It belongs to management. It belongs to business. And it is very funny that donors who have failed in the past, clearly, it's right, no? That many projects have, have not really led much result. But how? Have we assessed why? Are the same reasons applicable to different contexts? Have we ever considered the impossible burdens that donors have often put on populations, the so-called beneficiaries, that have not benefited at all of those projects often, but often those that have benefited have been the donors themselves. I'm sorry, I'm being, you know, I know what I'm talking about. Almost 30 years of experience in this field, so, and now donors who continuously claim the role of the private sector into providing basic rights like health are using recipes like result-based financing. I repeat, I'm not talking about your projects, to leverage the private sector. Actually, the result-based finance is pushed by the World Bank. It's pushed by the international financial institutions because governments basically have decided, have interiorized this idea which is unproven, and in fact, the proof is of the opposite. It goes in the opposite direction, that the private sector will be beneficial to health. So they have created this model, this idolatry of the public and private partnerships. It's an idolatry. I mean, oftentimes it is NGOs or civil society organizations that are accused of being ideological, you know. I have no problems with ideologies or ideas, but I think what governments, starting from the UK, have imposed on the discussion about health cooperation is the idolatry of public and private partnerships, which does not, is not limited, unfortunately, health. It's the same paradigm for education, it's the same paradigm for everything, okay? It's the paradigm, if you like, that is now managing COVID. Because whether we like it or not, and I personally dislike it enormously, the international community that has been confronted for the first time with the real global pandemic, because we've had pandemic in the past, but not to this level of geographical extension, they have entrusted the management, the architecture, the operational architecture of the management of such a huge crisis to public and private partnerships like Gavi, CEPI, the Global Fund, that are actors of private law. These guys make contracts. They don't make agreements. They create private transactions with pharma sector, finance sector, all entities that are inside these very bodies, okay? You will find the Gavi is, of course, it has a few governments, but it, above all, has the pharmaceutical sector inside, the financial sector inside. ACT Accelerator, this access to COVID tools accelerated, is being designed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Seattle when they got very worried that the WHO in February 2020, on the 11th and 12th of February 2020, WHO convened a very important meeting of the best science in infectious diseases to discuss how to tackle this disease. And the main result of this discussion was we need to share science. We need to share all the medical knowledge we have. We really need to cooperate, okay? And then, of course, the Oxford University, at the end of March, when they started to engage for the vaccine, they were the first ones at that time, they made a declaration that whatever would come out of the Oxford scientist group should be shared, should go to everyone, should be accessible as knowledge to any producer in the world that could make that. And Mr. Bill Gates, who doesn't like sharing because his fortune is built on patent monopolies, immediately created something that could allow his foundation and the industrial groups that rotate around this foundation to reconquer the situation. They designed this ACT accelerator, which is basically, it's based on the operationality of public and private partnerships. COVAX, which is a kind of a merchant bank, in fact, is miserably failing because, of course, it has a kind of initial defect of construction. It doesn't work for the poor. It doesn't work. But donors continue to indulge into these strategies that are very beneficial for the rich, for the powerful, and then they go to the populations in the south with their kind of business-like recipes to measure, question, assess, count, you know, to put a lot of burden and strings on the people, starting from the doctors that are working in very dire conditions at times. No wonder there is a high turnover. One of the main problems that the Global South has is the big hospitals in the north going to the south to recruit personnel from the south and bring them to Europe, bring them to the UK particularly. So the question I want to raise, of course I could go on, I will finish, I understand it, I will finish, but the question I would like to raise here is a few questions to you who are doing the job properly, because these are also, I think Giovanna very brilliantly started from the challenge. I think it's a very womanly exercise. In the face of all the literature that has emerged on result-based financing, which is very controversial literature, it's very, you know, and Dominique also was referring to this, your two hospitals, I think, can be a very important example of how such externalities, negative externalities, need to be handled and need to be recognized. Notwithstanding the pressure of the donors, because donors have this idolatry ongoing. And the Italian agency, Mariangela, you know, that belongs to that clique. So how do we, my questions are, how do we contextualize result-based financing and the production of results? What results? What results? And how do we measure results or outputs, as we are lately have, I mean, they call it an innovative mechanism. It is not really so terribly innovative. It is simply transferring the business model into the health sector. It's not innovative at all. And also, it dates back to the 90s. So, I mean, it was really harvested in 2003. So let's also get out of this innovation, you know, mantra that everything is innovative. Whenever they mention innovation, there is some sort of private sector thinking behind. So I think we really have to also appropriate the right language for this. We have to, you know, share the language that everybody feels comfortable with. Who sets up the measurement? Who sets up the criteria for the measurement? And how? Giovanna again mentioned the emergency of malaria. You have disease emergencies, you have instability of the countries, you have a systemic injustice dealing with countries of the Global South. You may not know that 41 countries of Africa could not raise their expenditure in health during COVID because of the debt. Public and universal, and I'm sorry, user fees should be abolished. The WHO took a position on user fees long time ago. Especially the poor should not pay for the basic health services that allow them to survive. User fees, there is no such a thing as a low cost for health, because these people are already paying in so many other things. So as we have these things in our countries, public and universal health, we should make all efforts possible to really secure that the same right to health is granted publicly and universally and free of charge for everyone. So I think there are a lot of interesting areas that can be discussed, should be discussed, and should be challenged also, because another world is possible, and I think that COVID is a wonderful pedagogue to teach us that the public system, the role of the public sector, is what really counts when we are talking about health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you were quite clear in your messages. And now I want to invite Stroppiana, Dr. Andrea Stroppiana, to tell us about the results, the meaning of result in result-based, and maybe try also to answer and provide some answers to some of the provocation and challenges that were done in the previous intervention.
Okay, I'm going to talk today about the meaning of the R in RBF acronyms. What does it mean, the word results? I am teaching RBM in La Sapienza University in Italy, in Rome, and in the International Training Center of the United Nations. And I realized that many UN officials coming to the training, they are used to deal with projects, but they do not know exactly the meaning of results. So I want to help convey my message with one slide. That is the slide I want to talk about. But don't read it now. We will read together. It's just a result chain and activity matrix proposed by the European Commission, and is the matrix of the word result-based. You remember result-based was used more than 20 years ago, but it was formalized in 2005 during Paris Forum on aid effectiveness. So one of the 5 principles for aid effectiveness was managing by results. The meaning of that is not so commonly spread. That is why I want to spend 25 minutes maximum, even less if I can, in explaining that. In order to help me in this explanation, I want to show you something. Look at that. You know what is that? Maybe you cannot see from distance. It's a leaflet of a pizzeria. Oh, come on, we're in Naples, the capital of pizza. These leaflets of a pizzeria I found on the windscreen of my car. Yesterday morning when I came out to go to job. So I want to take that as an example to convey a message. What is that I have in my hand? Is a piece of a project of Mr. Ciro, the owner of pizzeria. So if I look at that chain, what I have in my hand is this yellow level, outputs. What does it mean, output? Output, it is always a tool. In this case, this tool is a tangible one because I have in my hand. But we have a lot of tools that are not tangible, like, for instance, a training course, a network, a partnership. Many tools are tangible, like an X-ray machine, a machine for echography, an hospital, a road, a bridge, all tangible tools. Which is the benefit of the tool? A tool is made to produce a service. And so, as a tool, the leaflet is neither good nor bad. It's just a tool, it's neutral, like a hammer. A hammer is not good, it's not bad, it's a hammer. It can provide me a service if I have to drive a nail in a wall to hang a picture, for instance. So it's not good, but it can help me to do something good. It's not bad. I can use the hammer to kill my wife. So it's not so good. It's a hammer, it's neutral. But what about if I don't have a nail, if I don't have a wall, if I don't have a picture to be hanged? So this hammer becomes completely useless. And so, if we go from outputs to this orange level, we pass from tools to benefits. So, result chain is from yellow to green. So we have seen the level of tools. Now we start looking at something very different in nature. We said a tool is an instrument. Outputs are instruments. Instruments are never good nor bad. But now the service given by the instruments are good, or they're supposed to be. So Mr. Ciro was managing a lot of activities, the wide level that is outside result chain. That means activities are not results. Mr. Ciro had to produce that, had to think about the graphic pattern, the quantity, had to pay Mr. Muhammad to go and distribute the leaflet on the mailboxes or on the windscreen of the cars, or living in the waiting hall of the post office. Activities. But what was the intermediate outcome in the Ciro project? Which is the service given by that? The service given by that is to be informed. So one thing is the tool, neither positive nor negative. One different thing is to be informed. The same way, if we launch a campaign in order to reduce HIV or hepatitis, the campaign is the output, the knowledge is the intermediate outcome. Why intermediate? Because it is something important, but is not the aim of Mr. Ciro. I am informed that the pizzeria close to my house is selling very good pizza Napolitan style. It's doing a delivery service free of charge, etc., etc., etc. I am informed. But for Mr. Ciro, it's never enough to be informed. What's important for him is that the service given by the output, this is the output, this is the service given, will achieve the blue level, that is the success or failure of Ciro idea. So the difference between the orange level and the blue one, it depends only on me, not on Ciro. The fact of being informed was the effect of that. Ciro was responsible, me, to be informed. But what about achieving the blue level? The blue level is come and buy pizza. Becoming customer, that depends only on me. So there is a big difference in control and responsibility between this level and that level. So this one is the watershed between success and failure. If nobody goes and buys pizza, that was money thrown to the rubbish. If the number of customers is not increasing, Mr. Ciro was not spending the money in an appropriate way. It was wasted. So we must think that we have this orange level that I will call the ghost level, because very frequently is missing. That is the level we have control on. In this example, the level of knowledge. And the success or failure, the outcome level in result-based, is a level we do not have control on, because it depends on others' behavior. So if I have young students informed about the risk of contracting HIV, but when they are in intimacy with boyfriend and girlfriend, they do not protect themselves, my project will not originate any benefit. It could be our campaign a total failure, because we don't achieve this level. So there is a difference in contents between a tool, something I can control, orange, some others. If we do not understand the difference between control and not control at all, the outcome is totally outside our control. Totally. We don't know what will happen when those women get back at home. Should they boil the water or not? Should they behave in the intimacy with boyfriends in an appropriate way, protecting themselves or not? It depends on them, not on me. So if we shift from these results to the indicators that we need in order to apply result-based financing, what we need is to understand which kind of communication those indicators should provide to us. Otherwise, we will not apply result-based financing appropriately. Why? Because measuring activities and output is very easy. If I am making a training course, it's easy. This training course, the benefit produced by the first benefit, but these leaflets. So the indicators, the most important of the indicators is the one totally outside our control. The watershed between failure and success, the blue level. This is measuring the change we want to see. This change that we want to see doesn't depend on us. Why we spend money? We don't spend money to have leaflets. We spend money to have customers. Buy pizza. So the blue level, it doesn't depend on Ciro. Because if I don't like pizza the way Naples is done, I will never buy pizza there. If I am on a diet, I will not eat pizza. It depends only on me, not on Ciro. But success or failure is the blue level. So the indicators at that level escape from our will. Depends on others. On the opposite, indicators, oh no, I don't want to talk the green level, I will talk after. The indicators at orange level, they depend on me. Not 100%, but let's say 70% of course, because it depends if those benefits, service, are provided by the output I funded. Money is related to output and activities, not to benefits. We don't pay benefits, we pay outputs, we pay leaflets. So, are we going to measure if people are informed due to my campaign, due to my leaflet, due to what I'm doing? Am I measuring only the number of TV spots on road signs, leaflets distributed, or I'm measuring the level of knowledge acquired? So these kind of indicators are telling me if my target group is receiving the benefit, not if I produced the benefit, if they received it or not. It's a big difference. If the know-how is acquired by the doctor, not transferred to the doctors, it's very different too. So using RBF, now I'm not talking about RBM, but RBF means measuring at every level what is competent to this level. Outputs, of course, the instruments. Did we produce that? Very easy to be measured. Service provided, more difficult to be measured. Outcome, watershed between failure and success, is the most important. That could measure too. So in an RBF, let's make sure that minimum those two levels are under control in order to control that level. The impact is the long term, is the mainstreaming. Is if our idea, our project is in the stream of the already established priorities in my areas. That's the mainstreaming. So my impact, Ciro's impact could be for him to increase the name of his pizzeria, the income coming to him. Indirectly, for the neighbor, is contributing to well-being of the other. For instance, all this colored chain, not only the yellow level. So when I'm evaluating projects, when I have to evaluate the way projects are done according to result-based management idea, I want to be sure that those 4 levels are tackled in this direction. And if we want to use RBF in health sector or in other sectors, first of all, let's try to make sure this logic is followed. Okay, I finished. I hope to have been even shorter than expected. I don't want to steal the time of my colleagues that for sure have to say things more important than mine. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You have actually indeed been shorter than your allotted time, but it was extremely interesting. It gave us a contextualization and another perspective. Now I want to announce that we will jump the coffee break, but for those who really need some water or caffeine, there is coffee outside, so you can go. And now I want to welcome Sergio Beraldo from the University of Naples, Department of Economics, who will give us a different, again, perspective on the results that have been achieved.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much. Well, I allow Thomas to cut the time available to me by 10 minutes because we are quite late. I just want to thank our... Okay. Well, first of all, let's say some words about RBF. I guess that many of you know what I'm talking about, but anyway, results-based financing for health is a term for programs that link material rewards to results. Well, incentives can be targeted to individuals or to organizations, or they can be targeted to local governments. But results-based financing is a sort of umbrella expression because there are many ways to arrange schemes which share the logic of results-based financing. But what are the basic ingredients of this kind of approach? Well, we first need a donor, because if there is not a donor, there is no results-based financing. Then we need a recipient, an objective that can be stated in terms of effort or outcome. This is the objective that the donor is trying to achieve. Ciro's objective is to sell more pizzas, maybe. Then there is an incentive scheme which conditions payments to achievements. Well, the incentive scheme should be such that as to increase the probability that the objective is achieved. It should increase the probability that a given behavior is taken by the recipient. Then we need a monitoring process based on a clear evaluation strategy. Everything seems so simple, but it is not, unfortunately. Well, it does not work, I don't know why. Okay. I was trying to say, it seems so simple to use this, but it is not. No. Okay. Posso dire quando cambiare la slide, tu la cambi da là. Ah, okay, sorry. We have a problem with the PC. The PC. So I think that Thomas should allow me to speak a little bit more. Okay. Sorry for this. Well, what shall I do? Well, in what follows, I try to discuss some of the problems, because it is not that simple, actually. I try to discuss some of the problems that arise when one uses the basic ingredients of any RBF to design an RBF. Well, first of all, how economists interpret this situation. Actually, the language, but also the theoretical perspective, is a perspective and also a language which come from a managerial tradition. So I agree with Nicoletta. And the kind of perspective is the one which has been labeled as principal agent perspective, principal agent approach. One party delegates to another party a given task, but parties might have different motivations and conflicting objectives. This is the problem. So the principal tries to incentivize the agent to behave in line with its aims. So the problem becomes one of contract design. How to design a contract, which is an incentive scheme that allows the principal to achieve his or her objectives. There is an equal access to information, and I will try to show you why an equal access to information can be relevant by looking at some of the data we have analyzed. In this case, we look at admissions to the hospitals of La Chora and Calongo with malaria diagnosis. Well, during a malaria epidemics, hospital admissions can increase dramatically, as you know better than me. And this might affect death rates. Well, the principal might observe the increase in death rates, but not the increase in hospital admissions due to the epidemics. So it might be wrong in interpreting the increase in death rates as evidence that the targets has not been achieved due to the lack of effort. This is one of the problems that arise because asymmetric information, because the principal and the agent do not share the same information set. So information matters, and matters along various dimensions. I do not have much time to stay on this, but the principal quite often meets relevant difficulties in specifying and measuring the outputs related with the task. This can lead also to ex post opportunism. For example, if it is not really so clear if you achieved the objective or not, I might have an incentive to say, well, you did not achieve the aim, so I don't pay you. This is a problem. So we would like to measure correctly the output, but this is a very difficult task. There is a substantial evaluation problem. There are other drawbacks that might occur with the RBF approach. First of all, when financial rewards are linked to performance, it can motivate overproduction of rewarded tasks and underproduction of equally important but unrewarded tasks. Second, the RBF approach might entail that the risk is variously shared between the donor and the recipient. Well, you have to think about this, that any payment scheme carries with it a different division of risk between the principal and the agent. Third, people do not just care about material rewards. As the behavioral economics literature suggests, material incentives can backfire. They can lead to stimulate behavior which are different from the ones the principal would have liked to stimulate. Well, I don't speak about sharing the risk. I do not have time to speak about this, but just keep in mind that any incentive scheme presupposes a different sharing of the risk between the principal and the agent. And if the risk is too much on the agent side, the agent will not be willing to sign a contract to reach an agreement. So we have to be really careful in designing this kind of scheme. I try to say something about incentives and behavior. The basic law of behavior maintains that higher incentives will lead to higher effort, higher performance. It is not always like that. People do not respond automatically to material incentives. Other things are at least as important as material incentives in driving behavior. For example, adherence to social norms. The point is that in some contexts, the use of material incentives might be counterproductive because they can crowd out the intrinsic motivations people have. Why that? Well, monetary incentives from principles may change how tasks are perceived by agents. And for example, well, monetary incentives have two kinds of effects. Oh, I'm sorry about this. Monetary incentives have two kinds of effect. A standard price effect, which makes the incentivized behavior more attractive, and an indirect psychological effect. In some cases, the psychological effect might work in an opposite direction to the price effect, crowding out the incentivized behavior. Why do we have such an indirect psychological effect? Well, first, that achieving a specific goal is difficult, that the task is not attractive, or that the agent is not well suited for it. That is, she needs the additional reward. Incentives could signal that the principal do not trust the agent. So this weakens the intrinsic motivation of the agent. There is also a reputational value of incentives. When they decide to behave pro-socially is due to image motivation, being paid in public crowds out behavior. Because if I'm paid, okay, I'm already having my reward according to the gospel as well. Let's say some words about the evaluation problem. We need a way to control for spontaneous evolution. And this was clear from what I said before, okay? So we have to control that the spontaneous evolution of the system is in a sense affected by incentives. In this graph you can see the score on the vertical axis and the time on the horizontal axis. Well, we need to evaluate the effect of the incentives, a period, a pre and a post period, but also we need a control group because we have to control for the spontaneous evolution of the system. Only when we have a control group, we can be more confident that the treatment had an impact, had an effect. We have to take circumstances under consideration. So if we do not have a control group, it is very difficult to make an evaluation about the efficacy of the incentives. Persistence. How much incentives are persistent? This is a graph, This is a graph that I drew from a recent paper of mine with other co-authors from my department. We ran a lab experiment in which people were involved in games, strategic games, and they had the opportunity of cooperating with the others or not. The lines you see represent the evolution of cooperation over time. The blue line is the control group. The orange line is the treatment group. Well, as you can see, after some periods, the orange line goes up in those periods, we give incentives to stimulate cooperation. But when we take the incentives back, the cooperation goes back to the previous level. So there is no persistence effect. We have to consider this problem. We have to consider whether giving monetary incentives is something which affects behavior both in the short run and in the long run. Or otherwise we have incentive schemes that affect behavior, but as soon as we take the incentives back, there is no more a behavior in line with what we would like to have. We have to stress the link between task-related payment and the dimension which is being evaluated. This is something which, this evidence is drawn from the data we got. We give incentives, but we do not know which kind of dimensions are affected by the incentives we give. So, objective versus subjective measures of performance. What does measuring performance mean? External commissioners are more efficient than objective measure of performance in instructing us on the efficacy of the problems of the program. Well, personally, I prefer more objective measures to assess a program. And there are many, even though I believe it is not so easy to collect data in these kind of situations. Death rates, hospital admissions, and to give us the highest rewards, to be effective, RBF intervention must be properly designed and its effects have to be properly assessed. The quality of the assessment is very, very important. It is key to reduce also the uncertainties that the agent faces when payments are related to performance. So the donor might use ex post opportunism to exploit the agent. And this is something we have to take into consideration. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And now I have the pleasure to invite the first of our Ugandan guests, James Mwaka, from the Minister of Health of Uganda. James has come to Lachor many times to carry out the verification. So James is the verifier. He's the one who is making this assessment. So the objectivity and the biases about this external verification shall be put at his door. He's the one who guarantees that we are not making assessments that are just in favor of our goals. So thank you very much, James. If you want to come here to the desk and
good morning. I'm happy to be here, and greetings from Uganda, specifically the Ministry of Health. I would like to thank the organizers for this wonderful event. At least for the first time, we are sitting as different players to try and understand the subject, dig deep into what it is to help us understand this better. Particularly, I want to thank the two foundations, Coty Foundation and the Dr. Ambrosoli Foundation, for the most and immense feeling for the people of northern Uganda and Uganda as a whole. I remember when I was still a young man, I would hear people say, the moment you walk into Kalongo Hospital and you just see Dr. Ambrosoli, you get healed. I thought it was a small statement, but over time, I have learned that it was a very powerful statement and it means a lot. And indeed today, we saw from some of the presentations what those statements mean. Thank you very much to the two foundations, and I would like to say that the impact of your interventions are felt sincerely in northern Uganda and Uganda as a whole. So I'm going straight to my presentation. I was given a very broad topic, RBF experience in Uganda, and I was wondering what to touch and what not to touch. But I'll try to be focused on key areas. The rest might come in the question and answer session. So this is my outline of the presentation. I would like to let us know that Uganda as a country has walked a journey in this area of RBF for a number of years now. And it dates back to the year 2003. So, the slide that is coming, which I chose to call the background and history of RBF, I am intending to demonstrate how RBF started and where we are currently. Okay, as he works, I can, yes, that one. Sorry, it's a bit crowded, but what I want to show is that the journey of RBF started some years back in 2003, and basically it started as a pilot. There was a study by the World Bank, and this was succeeded by other small projects that were also doing pilots. Notably, we had the Code Aid project, which worked with the private not-for-profit facilities in one of the regions in Uganda. And then we also had the UK Aid one, which was alluded to earlier on, where both Kalongo and Lacho participated. And then we had another scheme, which was a little bit more in terms of coverage. It was supported by the Belgian Development Agency under what is called BTC. Now it has changed to what we call Enable. And this was followed by the massive one that we have currently, which is on a project called Uganda Reproductive Maternal Child Health Improvement Project, AMCHIP in short. And this has a very wide coverage in terms of RBF in country. However, in all these approaches, there were two approaches. There were two approaches in this RBF journey. There's what we famously call the demand-sided RBF, and then the supply-side RBF. A little bit of what these two things mean. The demand-sided RBF is the one where the incentives were actually provided, a blended model, which is currently adopted as one of the major ingredients in the health financing strategy of Uganda. Next. So a little bit of the principles, those are the ones. I will not take a lot of time, but we zero to these principles based on other literature from elsewhere, but also looking at what we want to see. Number one is separation of functions, because there should be different entities to perform different tasks to ensure that there is no possibility of conflict of interest. Purchaser, regulator, provider, and so forth. And this is something that we all know. Secondly, autonomy of providers. This principle supposes that the providers have the flexibility to plan for what they want to see. This is based on the earlier observations that we have had under the input-based financing systems, where it is already predefined what the investments, where the money should be invested, and how the services should be run, pulling away the privilege of deciding, having real-time decision on interventions that should be undertaken to make corrective measures. So in this RBF principle, we say the providers have the autonomy to plan and see where they can put the money to realize the best out of the investments. However, it is also guided. Number three, public-private partnerships. I will not go much into that. We recognize that the private sector is a very important sector, an important health subsector. Oh, go back, yes. Important health subsector in Uganda, providing health services. As you will see later, I will mention that out of the current number of hospitals we have in country, it is almost a 50-50% ownership between the private. I'm talking about private, not for profit, which includes the Lechos, which includes the Kalongos. It's almost a 50-50%. So that shows that we cannot do without the private health sector, the PNFP health subsector. That is why we cherish that in this RBF, the private, the partnership is key through feedback mechanisms that we get, and they also are part and parcel of the planning processes at facilities. Then equity, we believe in equity. And then lastly, the RBF program is basically additional funding to the sector. It doesn't replace the other funding. Next slide. So, out of all these lessons that we learned through the journey from 2013, government of Uganda decided spans from the service users up to the topmost national RBF interagency committee. In that committee is a central level committee. Its membership includes the top management at Ministry of Health, and then representative from health development partners. And then below, we have the National RBF Steering Committee, which is what we call the Health Sector Budget Working Group. And then we have the Ministry of Health as a regulator and so forth. We will share the presentations. I may not go into each of them because I have little time to present too much. Next. The next slide is about the coverage. You will see the whole country is currently undertaking RBF. The differences in color relate to when the different districts actually were admitted onto the RBF program. Red is the rest are AMCHIP, but red, those are 4 districts in Acholi that are supported by Enable. Enable, previously BTC, is also undertaking RBF program in that region. So the 4 districts are Gulu, Noya, Amuru, and Omoro. It excludes Agago, where Kalongo is, under the Enable supported program. Next. So you will see this is still the same. This in terms of numbers and how the facilities are distributed. But what I want to say clearly here is that government-owned facilities are 83% of the entire facilities in country on the RBF program, while the PNFP health subsector contributes about 17% of the facilities. Next. So what are some of the other things that we have seen? There are already gains that we have seen from the RBF program. I will not talk about each of them. The red lines represent the current achievements, but what I want to communicate here, that we see that there has been a positive improvement. So in terms of the DHMT functionality, this means we are talking about the management functions of the district health management teams that actually support the facilities and hospitals in terms of supervision and oversight functions. So we are seeing that already there is a sign that there are improvements. Now, in terms of quality of care, you will see that the blue is the PNFP and red is public. Generally, you can see that something has changed. There's an improvement from where we started. We considered the financial year 17-18 to financial year 19-20. You will see that there are already improvements, except that you'll see that the margin of the improvements are not really very substantial. But we already want to re-examine that. Could it be the the robustness of the tools that we use. We don't have the answer, but at least what I want to communicate is that there's already an upward movement in terms of the quality of care. Now, in terms of utilization, overall, we will see that there is an improvement in utilization, considering some of these indicators. And this we somehow attribute to the RBF program. And notably, you will see that for first antenatal care, there was a 43.5% increase. Now, the next is still talking about the contribution of the voucher system, which was one of the RBF programs. You will see that that yellow or orange line relates to the contribution of that program. So you will see that when the program was on, it continued to improve, but when it stopped, then there was that downward trend. But one important thing to communicate here, even when the voucher system withdrew, you can still see that there was a maintained improvement in terms of utilization of institutional deliveries. Partly that could be because of the RBF, because the AMCHIP RBF program immediately succeeded the voucher system. To continue, we already saw, you will see in the annual health sector performance report, there is already reduced level of reduction in maternal and infant deaths, transformed leadership, declined rate of health worker absenteeism by about 42%, increased morale among healthcare workers. Then the other is the reduced stock out of essential medicines, enhanced ownership of data and use of providers, and then used by providers, and then improved environment at the facilities. Next. So the lessons learned are very many, but I want to summarize them because of time. That one is that there is already evidence that RBF can improve utilization of services. And then we can see that the assessment of results in quality improvement planning supports sustainability. Where if you have the results and then you put in place another mechanism, like quality improvement, it sustains the gains that you have had. And then this also amounts pressure at management level, where the managers are key at ensuring that they put in place the required improvements over time. So those are some of the lessons that we have learned. And then the next one. I will skip some of them because of time, but I know the slides will be available. Now, the key considerations for successful RBF, based on what we have seen, is that if you have careful selection of the indicators, you succeed. Number two, you must have a strong and robust verification of the results. 3, you should be able to control fraud. If you don't, then you cannot see what you want to see. 4, robust system to monitor and mitigate the RBF side effects. The side effects are those things like, trying to work into the direction of incentives. Those are one of them. And then reliability of data. If your data is not reliable, then you cannot have a successful RBF. Then willingness to adapt and respond to assessment findings and recommendations. Teamwork is a fulcrum. And then use of evidence for planning is good, and then a good feedback mechanism. Yes. A snapshot of Lacho and Kalongo, we just want to say that these two hospitals provided a very good opportunity for learning. And a lot of lessons have been drawn from what has been happening in El Kalongo and Lacho hospitals. And I'm happy to note that some of the good practices are already being replicated in other areas. So I would like to thank the team of these two hospitals. And we acknowledge that these are very important hospitals. Thank you very much.
James, thank you really for your presentation. I think we can all agree that it was very clear, very effective, and it gave us the Ugandan perspective very much. So thank you, and we also were able to recover in the end nearly all the time lost. So thank you also for that. Yes, so Sergio wants to say something. Afterward, we will hear from Dr. Martin in Lachor, the institutional director. But first, I will give the word to Sergio. Turn on the microphone first. You need to turn on the microphone first.
Two very quick things. The first one is that there is some coffee just outside. We will not have a proper coffee break. We are sorry for that. But as we are late, we need, to speed up. So, but everyone who wishes a coffee can go out and help himself or herself. Second, I would like to say hello, to greet Professor Massimo Marelli, previous Dean of the University of Naples Federico II and Emeritus Professor of Public Economics. We are really happy he is here. Thanks very much for coming.
Now I want to know if, from the technical team, if Lachor is connected. È connesso Lachor. Dr. Martin da Lachor Hospital. So, Doctor, in the meantime, I can say a few things. Dr. Martin is a surgeon in Lachor Hospital, is one of the historical took over in 2008. I hope Dr. Martin is with us. Here you can see the slides, the picture of the hospital from above. As you can see, it's a huge hospital. Part of it is hospital proper, then there are schools, and there are...
Hello, are you able to hear?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Martin.
Okay,
you're welcome.
Yeah.
Your voice is a bit low.
I'll try to... I hope it's a bit clearer. Hello, is it clearer now?
Yes, now I think we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I will just proceed with the slide. But first of all, I would really like to thank the University of Naples. I would thank ICE and Ambrosoli and the Coty Foundation for organizing this conference, and of course the colleague hospital of Kalongo. This slide shows Lacho, that the important part I would like to emphasize here is that Lacho and the health centers have a huge number of healthcare workers. We are about 739 workers. If you add the training programs, which are 5 in the school, that is midwifery, nursing, theater, laboratory, anesthesia, you have a population of about 600 students. And then the Guru University, about 300. So whatever is done in Lacho has a very big effect and a big possibility of being spread by this huge number of persons. That's the hospital. The background is a short one, but I thought I would share with you just one or two selected health trends, financing, and then look at the RBF as before. But first, the history. This history enables us to see where Lacho has come from. 1959 to 62, the hospital was established, and 62 is the year of independence. And the post-independence period was characterized by establishing the hospital, trying to put the service on offer, and try to have infrastructure and equipment in place. Unfortunately, this was interrupted by the military regime of Idi Amin. You must have heard about Idi Amin. This had a devastating effect on the health system of the country, and that meant that most of the services in the north had to be provided by Lacho because the health system was falling. People could not go there. So they decided to choose to come to Lacho, and that increased the number of services to be offered and also the population that accesses services. This would not help in the next 5 years was just political instability, and there was war, and the health system continued to be run down. But from 1986 to 2006, there was again another local insurgency. This was also another very, very devastating effect because the rebels or the rebellion or the insurgency was really situated in where Lacho and where Kalongo is. So northern Uganda was greatly affected. But for Lacho, there was and Uganda as such, there was a running epidemic. HIV pandemic was very rampant and very devastating. If you come to Lacho, you'd find a 100-bed tuberculosis ward at that time. Fortunately, treatment became available in 2004, and this has sort of leveled that pandemic, but it's still we have almost 6,500 clients on treatment. Ebola was very short, but extremely devastating because in this short period of about 6 months, we lost the director of the hospital, we lost 13 staff, and the psychological effect was immense. But we also learned lesson, and this lesson has fortunately also helped us to handle the current pandemic. A cover economy to see the quality which we are providing and try again to live to the mission of the hospital, that is providing affordable quality services to the big number of the population who can access. The third strategic plan, which is running, aims at providing sustainable quality care in a humane and supportive way. And from this slide, I would say that Lacho continues to remain affordable. We do not charge more than $2 for a child who is admitted for whatever period with a common sickness. We do not charge more than $10 for a mother who has come to the hospital, and we hope that this is affordable. And I totally agree that universal coverage and having minimal user fee is something which is very important. For us, the RBF was a very good intervention to help us to standardize our operation and services, but also to gain some efficiency. There could have been places where resources were not optimally used, and this RBF was a shot in the arm, and we are happy. I will now go straight to some trend. This is deliveries. We pick deliveries because this is the core of our mission. Has been going up. There was a bit of leveling because of the current pandemic, but we hope that we continue to have as many mothers as possible deliver within the health system in northern Uganda or in Uganda as such. So it is part of the mission, and we appreciate the number of deliveries in the hospital. The alternative is if you deliver unassisted in the village, then the maternal mortality and the perinatal mortality increases. So the aim is to encourage as many people as possible to deliver in the hospital. The green line shows the inpatient, the trends of admission. Inpatient is extremely expensive. And I think this, so I picked this slide because the health system, really the most expensive part is the inpatient, not the OPD. But I've also put our health centers. And as you see, inpatient admission has leveled off, and we are hoping that we are able to clear or able to handle cases which are in the community. This slide is just financing the recurrent costs. If you look, we are still 65%, 65.9%, 0.09% dependent on funds outside this country. So it means that the funds that can be mobilized within this country is only 34.91%. So it is impossible to maintain the same level of service and extend the same level of expense if partners do not come to help him. And again, we continue to appreciate what partners are doing, and this enables us to serve the poor population as much as possible. Historical perspective of RBF has been covered, but for us it was introduced by DFID UK Aid, and we have recently had the natal and child health. This is where the emphasis of the RBF has been, and then to use and strengthen the WHO building blocks of health system. So the indicators and the measures is key. It is usually assumed that whatever we produce maybe is providence, but it has brought keen awareness among health workers that there is a financial part of it and there's a performance part of it, and this must be linked. And it is important that whatever finances we get, we use it prudently. And of course, it has increased the standard of services. And the last one of ICE has helped us a lot to look into the global safety within the hospital. For the time being, it's mainly based on patients, but we hope that we do cover the environment. We do cover the environment as well, and we hope that this would cover the attendants and anybody who comes within the unit. Standardization of care is something which has been provided, and protocols are now being followed, and it's something which we thought was really concretized by the RBF. Correction of errors and potential cases of errors is something which is being engraved. I mean, these ones are behavioral change, so it takes some time to have it, but at least errors are not seen as something to be hidden. They are seen as opportunity to learn, and we think this is very helpful. Functional equipment and infrastructure and awareness about maintenance is something which is coming to the fore, because these indicators bring where the deficiency are. In the past, people used to think, oh, if you have a broken pulse oximeter, let them buy. If you have a broken suction machine, let the technical department repair. They do not follow this as closely as now. So we think that the global awareness was brought by the RBF to make sense in all healthcare workers that they have responsibility to take. And importantly, we have now started the process of involving trainees. And we think that once you inculcate this responsibility inside trainees, it would be very, very helpful for the whole system. Strengthening of the system within the hospital has worked very well. And RBF continues to bring forward other areas, reminding us about the indicators. It is possible to forget some areas if there's no external eye to look at it, or if the internal eye has assumed that that is how it is. But external eyes always help us to look at those other areas. Inclusiveness, I think this has been mentioned very well. Usually during the time when we are giving the feedback, it is very, very clear that performance is related to funding, but it's also more important that all of us sit together. So the hierarchy which is there, the hierarchy which is always there in the medical field, somehow is broken by this feedback. You have directors sitting together with support staff, with all the staff, and listening and answering questions and finding solution, and hoping that next time around, this solution would be very, very clear. At the district and national level, we were brought closely. I think the ministry has already mentioned this, but we are very, very pleased. Before it was like inspection. People just come to see what is wrong provide no solution, write reports. But now they come and supervise us, and we discuss issues which are there, and we seek collective way of improvement. We of course know there are big challenges and constraints within the health system, especially the not-for-profit hospital. It is also the same for the country, but at least it affords us a chance to discuss, because funding is reality. To mobilize resources within the country is quite difficult. And if you have partners on board, it is very, very helpful. And we continue to impress upon government that the health sector is something which is quite important. And if there are resources elsewhere, we should be thought of. So it's also a chance for advocacy and discussing. Watchful eyes always help. Where the watchful eye is coming from a donor is even more important, the person who is financing, or it is coming from the supervising authority. It is very, very important. So usually care is done according to set standards. The care means the health care, and the gaps are often corrected, unless if they're very, very difficult, but at least people or leadership are aware of that gap which exists and plan towards correcting it once resources are available. And the sense of responsibility is actually very interesting to see how the sense of responsibility spreads within the staff. Even workmates now help to remind others about mistakes which are done. In the past, it was called witch hunting. But now, pointing out the error, pointing out some mistakes which has taken place, is taken very well. In the beginning, it was difficult. But now, after 10 years, I think people of this year have now accepted the RBF, the quality that comes with it, and of course, the cost efficiency gains that come with it. Introduction of RBF as really measures other standards which have been set by the hospital, so that we don't only look at incentivized indicators, but we look broadly. And this assures really ownership by the whole hospital. There are, of course, areas of improvement, and as management of the hospital, we think that RBF should be widened to include all the sectors of the hospital. Now, actually, 3/4 of the sectors of the hospital are involved, and we are now looking towards the surgical department. We think that indicators should be widened as much as possible. The big challenge is the behavioral change communication. This is something which we have realized is difficult. And we always see it when you recruit new staff or you bring new students. This concept is new to them. They can throw gloves in just other areas, not doing good waste segregation and bringing other infections. So we think that behavioral change communication is going to be a continuous process. And of course, we need to extend the concept of quality and standards to all the trainees. Lacho and Kalau has that chance to impact it on the students. Record has been mentioned, and RBF has really improved the data aspect. People now see data as something which is important, and it gives them opportunity to plan in the department. This is my last slide. The future outlook, I think I've mentioned this, should have spread across all departments. Of course, if it is, as the ministry is doing, spreading it across the whole health sector is very important. One thing which has already come very well is about referrals. There are some bad referrals and people who are not taking accountability for this. But we see that involvement of the government health facility has helped us to dialogue on the referral. Indicators I've already mentioned, we should widen it as much as possible. And of course, training on quality and standard should be something which must be maintained and involving the health training institution. And of course, we would want to share this experience as much as possible, starting from within our area, Gurukala area, and going forward, learning best practices from other areas. And of course, we'd like to involve as many partners as possible. I would just mention there are also other measures in the hospital where we actually do, it is not like a measure of the indicator. For example, hospital-acquired infection is a survey we do every.
Ask Dr. Smart if he's there. Is he there with you? Dr. Martin?
Yeah.
Is Dr. Smart there with you?
Yes.
Good. So I don't know if you could turn on the video so that we see you and try to speak louder, Dr. Smart, because we had challenges hearing. I'm sorry that the connection was not perfect. In a way, that can remind us of how the communication went on between La Chore and Italy until 20 years ago. There was a radio in the house of the Cotis, and the connection was not so good, and the only way to communicate between Italy and Uganda was this radio. So these challenges can somehow remind us of those times. Dr. Smart? È lo stesso, eh? È quello di prima.
Hello, Thomas, are you able to hear me?
So while we wait, I just want to add that I think it was very important what Martin said about the ability of RBF to subsidize the patients. And somehow maybe he could respond to some of the Dentico issues. But now I see that we have the connection. Dr. Smart, you're welcome. I know you have traveled the way from Kalongo to Gulu. It's not as long as to Italy, but it's very bumpy, I know, especially when it's rainy. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thomas, are you able to pick me?
You're still a bit low. Are you able to raise the voice?
Oh, yes, yes. Are you picking me?
A bit louder?
Hello, hello, Thomas. Are you picking me? We have a bit of challenges with technology here. Can you pick me now?
If you cannot talk louder, we can hear. But yes, it's still a bit far.
It's a little bit fine. Thank you so much.
This is much better, I think.
Yes. Sorry, we had a bit of technology problems.
Do you need to project some slides? We don't see them yet. Do you have the microphone off now? We don't hear you at all.
Okay. Hello, Thomas. Are you hearing me now?
Now we hear you.
Thank you so much. We had some technology.
There are two microphones on now.
Thomas, are you picking me?
Yes, I think now it's better. Please.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Acknowledge that the project comes to its logical conclusion. I will very briefly touch the historical perspective of Kalongo Hospital, which was elaborately touched, presented by Ms. Giovanna Ambrosoli in an earlier presentation. Kalongo is a 271 bed, in contrast with the Lachur picture. Currently, we have about 250 staff. Our operational revenue yearly, it's about 1.4 million euros. That's about 6 billion Uganda shillings, out of which 80% of it is donor funded, be it government, be it private donor. 80% of it is donor funded. We spend 70% of this operational revenue on human resources and medical consumables to see that the hospital can offer the services to the population. In the last year, the key indicators, our total contacts, total number of patients who came to the hospital, it's about 31,000. And our admissions were about 12,000. That is the figure in the last year. The ANC contacts, the mothers who come for antenatal visits and care, were about 6,000, and about 3,000 deliveries in the hospital. This is just to give a bit of a picture of the institution, Kalongo Hospital. Now, RBF in Kalongo was very much a new subject before 2016 when ICE came in. The last participation of the hospital in RBF was in 2016 on the DFID RBF. So at the end of the project, it was a silent period. So when ICE came in, the learning process had to start all over again, had to begin all over again. But nonetheless, we managed to learn through and move on. Now, RBF's coming to Kalongo brought with it significant lessons, as we saw from the previous presenters. The key one that I would want to point out is that before the project, before the RBF project came to Kalongo, the clinical and moral practices in the care for the sick child in the hospital was rooted on the routines of medical practice. By this, I mean diagnosing and prescribing treatment. For me, this is the key learning point. When RBF came on, the staff in the hospital, in the ward especially, now put more emphasis in learning about the sick child, communicating clearly to the parents of the sick child, and ensuring that the treatment environment is holistic, safe for the sick child. This is the key point. Now, why were we able to achieve this? This is because at the beginning of the project, the preparation of the project, when Professor Luigi Greco was traveling from Naples to Kalongo frequently, it involved taking staff through the core principles of best practices and its benefits. Now, doing this enables staff to understand that best practices would not only impact the health of a child, but also improve their professional ability. The ultimate outcome of this is the improvement in quality of care. So having RBF in the last 3 years contributed in many areas. The key area is what I've already mentioned, the overall clinical care. The other one that I want to talk about is strategic capacity building.
Dr. Smart, could you raise a bit the voice and move the microphone closer? Unfortunately here, maybe we don't know if it's there or here, but the volume is low.
Thank you. Is it better now?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So I was talking about the overall contribution of RBF to the hospital. The key one is what I've been already throwing some lights on, and that is improvement of the overall quality of care. in the treatment of the sick child. But the other one is the strategic capacity development. We had Dr. Martin earlier talk about involvement of the QI team, the quality improvement team, in following up the good works that have been put in place. The same practice is mentioned in Kalongo. We have the quality improvement team whose capacity has been strengthened to follow up on the quality improvement projects. And the other one is the human capacity development. There are two areas. The other capacity looks at the staff who are actually treating and working in the ward offering the care to the sick child. And then the other capacity development is the hospital which has never had a pediatrician will soon have a pediatrician, and we think it will transform many things in the care for the sick child. The treatment environment is more holistic, is more clean. We pay more attention, the staff pay more attention in cleaning the place. And key to note is infrastructure development. The children's ward in Kalongo was a very old, dilapidated structure before the RBF. But as I talk now, the structure is being transformed into a modern structure, which is more conducive for the treatment of children. All these are some of the key contributions. I would like to mention that the partnership between the Koti and Ambrosole Foundation also reinforced the collaboration between the two hospitals who were already collaborating, but with implementing the similar project with similar indicators, the collaboration became very, very strong, and we remain grateful to RBF for this. And we think that in the future, we can build on this collaboration to achieve better. RBF certainly, as already mentioned, contributed to staff motivation and commitment. But this could be related to the feeling that good performance is rewarded, as already seen. But I also want to think that the good performance could be related to the fact that positive performance is the result of their hard works. But what I can confirm is that the sense of ownership and responsibility was reinforced in the ward among everybody who participated in RBF. There are outliers in any group, but in the setting of RBF, even the outliers try so hard to be a part of the team. So that means everybody gets more involved. Yes, we did realize some gaps with the RBF, which we implemented in the hospital. One of them is in the RBF system. I'm very happy that the previous speakers have been talking about carefully selecting indicators to minimize the side effects of RBF. I have to say that the RBF project that we implemented was able to identify gaps, but then the indicators did not provide for mechanisms to track implementations of interventions. Now, I think that in ensuring continuity of good practice, it is very, very important that indicators track implementation of gaps, of addressing gaps, how we can address gaps. So the project was more emphasizing the curative aspect of quality of care. So for RBF projects to be holistic in achieving its results, we think that we should incorporate some preventive aspects among the indicators. I do not know how this can be assessed, but this would be very, very important. The tendency of staff to work because they know that they would be rewarded cannot be ruled out. I like the previous presenter who think we should do a study post-RBF period to understand if it was incentives driving good performance. So this is a very key point, and I think it would be important to look into that. Another point which agrees with what Dr. Martin presented is that the project scope was narrow to only the pediatrics ward. So in our case, it left a gap in improvement of quality services in the other areas of the hospital because all attentions were being focused in the children's ward. The idea that we are only rewarding incentives to staff from a particular department also created a sense of negativity to staff from other departments in the hospital because the incentives were not enough to reward everybody in the entire hospital. So we had to try to deal with this situation. So we think that it would be better to have a package that would eventually involve everybody in the entire hospital. Some of our key challenges that we noticed includes one, as Kalongo, the beginning was very difficult, as I mentioned earlier. It was very hard to make people understand, to get everybody on board. We all know that successful RBF requires a coordinated involvement of different sectors to achieve the desired outcome. For me, it was a big hurdle to get everybody involved, to get all the managers to understand, to get everybody to play. But eventually we overcame this hurdle and the project kick-started. Lack of required resources, these resources are a very important thing that ensures that staff are able to perform. These are very key things. This affected staff work in the beginning, but eventually it would be addressed during the period of the project. Another key thing, like Dr. Martin mentioned, is staff turnover. Every time you have new staff, you have to start all over again. And it is difficult to impart in them the principles of good practice that was already in place. As already seen from the previous presentation and other studies, RBF as a mode of healthcare improves service delivery. In Kalongo, I can use that as a case in point. It improves service delivery, and having RBF activity as routine practice within a hospital, it promotes a culture of teamwork and strengthened managerial supervision. This is very evident. What we think could be done to improve RBF in the hospital in the future is to refine the indicators. Refine the indicators which would enable us to track implementation of previous assessments. It would also be important to have RBF that involves the entire hospital. But in Kalongo Hospital, we think that RBF is a way to go to improve quality of service delivery. The institution also stands to benefit both in terms of infrastructure and equipment development. We thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smart. I think you stressed confirmed many of the things that Martin has said, but also added the importance of the collaboration between the two institutions, the sense of ownership and tracking the gaps and some challenges you had because the incentives were given to one ward but not to all of them. I think they were quite useful indications and things we have to think about and learn from. Now I want to thank you, colleagues and friends from La Shore, and now it's a time for another Ugandan guest, Dr. Emmanuel Ochola, the epidemiologist in La Shore Hospital and in charge of the RBF program, probably the person in La Shore